So I'm going to talk about three things. I'm going to talk about how you make money online. I'm going to talk about how you grow an online business. And thirdly, how you trade an online business. Tom Hunter is one of the investors in Ecomera, and he told me a lovely story. He backed an e-commerce business in the early days called Toyzone, and he was at their first board meeting. And the CEO said, so Tom, our sales were down last month, but don't worry, actually our loss has decreased. And Tom scratched his head. As a retailer, he knew that if sales were down, then your loss should increase. And the CEO said, don't worry, it's because we lose money on every order we ship. And it's a trick that Ocado has tried to pull off, although they've clearly made it up in volume. But the fundamental for me metric of making money online is profit per order times by number of orders. When I talk about profit per order, I mean I talk about true marginal profit per order in terms of gross margin minus marketing costs plus or minus sort of delivery costs or revenue. And understanding the trade-off between the volume of orders and the profit per order is the key to actually understanding how to make money. And there are lots of models out there. I work with one business, an online shirt retailer who makes £70 per order. We have Net-a-Porter who in the audience who probably would think that's a trivial sum to make per order. I have other retailers the other extreme who make single-digit pounds per order, but they do very large volumes. No right answer, but fundamental to understand where as a retailer you sit in there. The second one is then to understand how to grow and understand the relationship between customer acquisition costs, lifetime value, retention costs. Now, one of my most interesting metrics when I talk to a retailer and start talking about their sort of repeat purchase rate. And the most often quoted metric is retailers will tell you, and the reason it's often quoted is it kind of comes out of most analytics systems. They'll say, well, last week, 50% of my orders were from existing customers. That's an interesting number. I'm going to take a show of hands. How many people in the audience think that's a good number, a bad number, or an irrelevant number? I'll go for good first. Bad? Irrelevant? I would say number 3 is the right answer. And the reason is as follows. What is, I think, much more important in a business is to understand what your long-run repeat purchase rate is. So the most interesting number for me is, of all of your customers who you acquired more than 12 months ago, so your existing customer base, what percentage of them purchased in the last 12 months? That is a very important number. Fig Leaves, we were about 40%. Zappos is about 55%. That's, for me, a fundamental sign of how good you are at retaining your customers. Now, clearly that then generates a pool of people who are repeat customers. In any particular week, the percentage of customers who happen to be repeat customers is then just a function of growth. It's a function of how many new customers you've acquired. And therefore you find exceptionally fast growth businesses will typically have a small percentage of repeat orders in a week, and mature businesses will have a high percentage of repeat customers in a week. But in of itself, it is not a very helpful metric. So the challenge is then, once you understand your long run repeat purchase rate, it's then understanding, well, what is a sustainable growth rate? Actually, when you have businesses that sort of are growing at 100%, that's fantastic, but you can't grow at 100% for very long. You run out of people in the universe. So the challenge is to understand as you grow, what is sustainable? How do you go from the early days where you might be growing at 100% to then what is a sustainable growth rate, and how do you get the right trade-off of customer acquisition and customer retention? And it's very interesting. I sit on lots of boards and lots of people who write e-commerce business plans simply top down say, well, we think we're going to grow at 30% this year. Not understanding that actually when you turn that into, well, how big is your customer base and what's their repeat purchase rate and what's your customer acquisition strategy, you work out that the numbers don't add up. So understanding a sort of sustainable growth model, I think, is fundamental, very challenging, and most people really don't do it very well. And then the third thing is then how do you trade? And for me, how you trade is about distinguishing between what I would call inputs and outputs. And when I say what I would call, it would actually be what Jeff Bezos described as the difference between inputs and outputs. And the Amazon philosophy to trading is Jeff Bezos, it's in the public domain, he writes a letter every year to Amazon shareholders, and in 2010 it actually has some very interesting stuff in it. And he says, senior managers who arrive at Amazon are often surprised at how little we talk about financial results. He says, what we talk about at Amazon is controllable inputs. And most retailers sit in trading meetings talking about, well, what happened to conversion rate last week? What happened to our average order value? What happened to our sales? They're important metrics, but they're uncontrollable. They are the result of actions that you take. And what Amazon talk about is their range, their availability, their price competitiveness. And they don't just talk about availability, they talk about sophisticated metrics like page-weighted availability. Are we in stock of the things customers are looking at? And are we more in stock than our competitors? And the reason this is so important is because they can walk out of a trading meeting and you can do something about it. So again, I talk to a lot of businesses where, they sit in meetings, they talk about conversion rates, which go up and down all the time, but actually they are the result of all of the inputs that you take. And I think when we come on to then sort of customer acquisition and retention, one of the most fundamental things that drives customer retention is delivery on promise. Actually, for customers who place an order, you place an order at 3 o'clock on a Tuesday, when is that order shipped and when is that order received? Amazon, again, it's probably one of their most fundamental metrics is their delivery on promise, which is about 99.3% last time I heard, and is clearly the single biggest driver of repeat purchase rate. I was talking to the guy that runs BarnesandNoble.com, and he said it was very interesting when he joined Barnes and Noble. They weren't tracking it. They just weren't tracking systematically. It was an operational metric. It wasn't a sort of front and center CO metric. And he said they had a horrible repeat purchase rate, and they were doing all their CRM analyses and running promotions, and that wasn't moving the needle because it was nothing to do with that. It was everything to do with the delivery experience. So understanding the right input measures for retail businesses and then understanding how they correlate with financial outputs, I think is absolutely fundamental to success. And I just one story in conclusion, which is, reading it now is rather irrelevant, but it's very funny, is when a friend of mine submitted, a friend of mine was a VC, and an e-commerce business plan was submitted to them, and they had a standard form on the front of all the business plans to sort of pull out the key messages. And one of the questions was, what are your main sources of revenue? To which the respondent had filled in venture capital and angel investors, which were... Anyway, on that note, thank you very much.